politics, or should we simply have a blanket ban, just like we see in football and cricket? Let me know your thoughts and your views. gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon. These are the top stories from the GB newsroom. Julian Assange says it is surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and greeted by his wife, Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thanked the UK and the US for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
In other news, a couple who are accused of the manslaughter of their baby daughter will face a retrial. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. Both are facing a retrial on other charges. Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack insists he hasn't broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the general election. The Cabinet Minister says he had no inside knowledge of when the election would take place, despite previously revealing that he'd made more than £2,000 from the bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Tories have taken too long to deal with the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
Spanish police have released new footage in their search for missing British teenager Jay Slater. It shows a helicopter scouring the mountainous area, with search teams also on foot, having been joined by sniffer dogs. The Guardia Civil say their efforts are not being scaled back. The 19-year-old went missing 10 days ago now, whilst on holiday on the Spanish island. Early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become the thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. The Liberal Democrats have announced a plan to give every cancer patient a dedicated specialist nurse to support them throughout their treatment. It would see nearly 3,500 new nurses recruited across England, doubling the existing workforce by the end of the next Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davey, says it's a crucial step towards fixing the NHS.
Cancer waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many, many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
And Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says the Princess Royal is recovering slowly as he left a Bristol hospital after visiting his wife today. The Princess is understood to have been injured by a horse while out walking on her estate on Sunday evening. But she suffered some memory loss and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt aren't known. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. We've got absolutely loads to get our teeth stuck into, so let's get rocking. Now, we start with the betting scandal that has cast a huge shadow over this general election campaign, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, 2 Tory candidates and 1 Labour candidate have been suspended by their parties, and it's now being claimed that as many as 15 Conservative candidates and officials are now officially under investigation by the Gambling Commission over bets on the date of the general election. It rolls on and on. And I'm joined by GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. So until now, this was a Conservative blight. Now the Labour Party have been dragged in. Kevin Craig, a candidate, bet on the Tories. He bet against himself. Tell us more.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. You really couldn't make some of this up, could you? That's right. Yesterday afternoon, just as Labour had been congratulating themselves that this was only a Conservative problem, the news broke that Kevin Craig, who had been a Labour candidate, had been booted out of the party for allegedly placing a bet that he was going to lose in his quest to be elected. Now, today I've been with Labour. I'm here in Nottingham ahead of the head-to-head debate tonight, but I've been with Sir Keir Starmer and the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, at a doctor's surgery where what they want us all to be talking about is GP appointments and how they're going to fix that 8 a.m. scramble. But of course, what we are talking about is Gamblegate. So Sir Keir Starmer was asked if he thought there might be other Labour candidates who had placed bets and what he would do about those, if so. Let's have a look first at what he had to say.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week.
So Sir Keir Starmer very keen to stress how long the Prime Minister took to suspend his 2 Conservative candidates that are under investigation. In the case of Craig Williams, his former parliamentary private secretary, somebody that he was very close to, that was actually 2 weeks. Sir Keir Starmer was also asked if he'd ever made a political bet. He said he hadn't. All he'd ever bet on is the horses, but also that he didn't feel there was a need for the rules to change, that the public completely understand what is and is not acceptable, and the problem is the politicians. So sure, it is a Labour problem too, but I don't think it's in any way of the same magnitude at that's engulfing the Conservatives, because of course at the heart of the Conservatives is the allegation that several, I think 5, people close to the Prime Minister or close to people close to the Prime Minister had inside information that this is effectively a bit like insider trading. They knew when the general election was going to be, and they placed a bet to make some money on it. So of those, we've got the 2 Conservative candidates suspended. That's Craig Williams, Laura Sanders. Her husband was the Conservative campaign director. He's taken a leave of absence. The Conservative Chief Data Officer also taken a leave of absence, and a member of the Welsh Parliament, Russell George, the Deputy Conservative Whip, also has stepped back from his role because he too is being investigated by the Gambling Commission. Now, one Cabinet Minister, Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, has admitted to placing bets on the timing of the election, but saying that was back in April. He didn't have any inside knowledge. He's done nothing wrong. He's not being investigated. But really, you know, Rishi Sunak has not succeeded in closing the gap with Labour at all. They've had disaster after disaster, beginning with the rain that day, D-Day. We spent days talking about that. We're spending days and days talking about Gamblegate. This is the last thing he needs. And in the debate tonight, I think we're going to be hearing a whole lot more about it.
Beautiful stuff. Well, the chips are down tonight in my home city there of Nottingham. Looking beautiful. Thanks for joining us, Catherine Forster, on the campaign trail. Now, joined now in the studio by the former Labour Minister, Dennis McShane. Dennis, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Did you ever bet on politics or on yourself?
Once, on the morning of the Brexit referendum, there I was in the BBC, sort of gobbing away early in the morning, and in comes Professor Anand Menon, who's one of the great experts in Europe. And I said to him, Anand, what's the result going to be today? And he said, Dennis, I know the English. They'll bottle it. They won't dare vote to leave. Since I'd written a book a year before saying that they would vote to leave, I listened to him. I went straight out to Paddy Power and put, I think, 50 quid on it and didn't get very much.
And you got it wrong.
No, I said that they would vote to leave.
Oh, wow.
No, I didn't want them to leave, but I didn't trust Adam's judgment. I knew David Cameron and Nick Clegg in charge of the campaign. There was no chance we would win. So there we are. Otherwise, no. And I think, as Catherine, your reporter's just said, the problem isn't so much candidates betting on themselves. I think that's gone right back to sort of Charles Stuart Fox and Gladstone and everybody. But it's when you had inside information, and it's part of this sort of semi-seediness, sleaziness. I mean, Rishi Sunak is so rich he doesn't need to be sleazy. But there are a lot of people around him who have just been quietly making bits and pieces of money. We think of the COVID protective equipment scandals and so on.
Yeah.
And this is just the last straw, last example before we all go and vote in a week or two. And, you know, I just think he should never have come back. He's not really a proper politician.
Well, Dennis, I'm delighted that finally some good for you came from Brexit, because you've complained about it since 2016. So here we are. You got a few bob off the back of it. So smiles all round. Ed Davey admitted he bet in 2010 and he lost. He said he called himself a serial loser. His words, not mine. Is it time to just have a blanket ban about betting in politics? They're talking about doing the same as happened in cricket or in football. But then you look at Kevin Craig, the Labour candidate. He bet against himself. He bet on the Conservatives to win. That, you can't affect the outcome of that. This is a bit of a flutter, wasn't it? You're allowed to have a flutter unless, as you said, the key difference is you have insider information ahead of the public, and then you're clearly bending the rules.
That's true, but it's always best, I thought, to err on the safe side. I don't know much about betting or horse racing, where I think a lot more happens than, say, in other sports. Would I bet on Gareth Southgate winning the Euro Cup? Not sure. But I presume if somebody, a groom or somebody from stables, goes in and says, here's £500 on this horse, then if it's known that he's the groom, it really wouldn't be allowed. And I think it'd be just a lot healthier if politics could clean up so much of its funny money business. We thought all that was done and dusted 10 years ago. Not. It's back and it's bad. And I would hope Keir Starmer, when he becomes PM, just sets an example.
And Dennis, do you think this is part of a deeper malaise, a deeper rot that the electorate have got? They look at this carry-on, the shenanigans, the amount of money involved is crumbs compared to what these people earn, and certainly compared to the grand scheme of things, but they're just in it for themselves. Does it cast this wider thing that we need to drain the swamp? To quote that sort of Trumpian thing, there's a huge dissatisfaction with political parties across the board. Is this just saying they're just a bunch of charlatans?
I think it doesn't help. I mean, Trump arguing it is just silly, given his record in so many areas, women, money, anything. But I do think that there is a problem that it used to be said we want politicians should be purer than thou, should be absolutely sea green incorruptibles, as it was once said of Robespierre. And I think getting back to that, a bit of Puritanism, perhaps wouldn't be a bad thing.
And with the honey trap scandal, that's going on. That's just all sorts of shenanigans
walking out,
going on.
a lot of Tories are going to lose their seats, I expect, in the next week or two. Well, how big the so-called landslide victory is, I've still got a tiny question mark in my mind, but that's just long, bitter experience. But they're going to walk out then and expect directorships, advisory consultancies, working for public affairs companies. And that hiring fair, if it does happen after the election, will further discredit the Conservative Party. And again, I don't know who the new leaders of the Conservative Party will be, but I hope they would just try and clean it up.
OK, Dennis McShane, thanks very much for joining us, and I hope you spent that Brexit money very, very unwisely. Now, moving on, surely the biggest question here is, what does the great British public make of this betting scandal debacle? Has it got what politicians and pollsters call cut-through, which means it will affect the way that people vote? Or does it not really matter at all to them? Well, to find out the answer, GB News went out and about in Bolton earlier on to get the views of the locals there.
Well, it would do if it concerns each individual person, yeah. We should have rights to say what's what or what we want to do. I shouldn't be stopped from what I want to do.
Well, I think you have to think about responsibility and integrity, and that's what we expect from politicians in this country at the moment. And a lot of people asking the questions whether they are being honest with us and things like that. So I think we should be concerned about it. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, it does. I think it's wrong.
Yeah. And what is it about it that you think is wrong?
Well, they shouldn't be allowed to do it because it's all inside and nobody else can do it, only them.
It doesn't shock me, surprise me. No, not at all. It's just what they do. I think people now are not bothered whether they get caught or not.
Yeah, because there shouldn't be any scandals with government. That's not the, what you're meaning. Yeah, it's terrible. It's all wrong.
I expect it does. I think they should be setting an example, and they're not doing.
What about yourself?
Yeah, the same. I mean, you just don't know what goes on, and if they try and get other people to stop gambling or whatever, then obviously everything should apply to them in Parliament. We've got to abide by the rules, haven't we? So why shouldn't they?
If you want the answer, ask the great British public. The people of Bolton there, nailing it. One rule for them, one rule for us. They should be on a higher standard, not on a lower plane. I love the British public. They always get it right. Let's see how they vote on this and other matters. Now, I'll have lots more on the betting scandal throughout the show. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. And you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Now, it's the final week to see how you could win our summer giveaway. 15 grand cash, tax-free, and a whole host of treats on top. Now, lines close at 5 o'clock on Friday to make sure that you don't miss out. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, NHS leaders have warned of major disruption as a result of the hot weather and the impending junior doctors' strike. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. Make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. If you overget a milk or something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programmes like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later this hour, I'll be joined by an England legend after yet another pitiful performance by Gareth Southgate's England side last night. Incredibly, we're still the bookies' favourites to win the tournament. How? In the name of God, how? Moving on, the Liberal Democrats have pledged to double the number of specialist cancer nurses, and Sir Ed Davey says it would help the UK offer the best cancer care in the world.
It's about putting NHS and care at the top of our list of priorities in this election. We've been doing that from the start. Only the Liberal Democrats have got a plan to rescue NHS and to invest in social care and care. And within that plan, cancer treatment's been really a big part of it. And today we're talking about doubling the number of specialist cancer nurses over this Parliament. That's another 3,400. And I think that's important because cancer waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
And don't miss our big interview with Sir Ed Davey this evening. He'll speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, in our Vote 2024, The Leaders Special. And that's from 7 o'clock this evening, live here on GB News. Now, you've been getting in touch in your droves already about the two big topics of the day. The betting scandal. Does it matter? Are you completely fed up of it? A few people are saying it's tittle-tattle. Why are journalists so obsessed with it? And yet, when we just took to the streets of Bolton earlier on and put it to the great British public, they really do care about it. And they care about it because it says this. It says one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us. It says, do as I say, not as I do. I think that's the big issue here. Look, I was a candidate in 3 national elections. I bet on myself in all of them. I lost twice. I was a bookie's dream. I won once. Politicians do bet on themselves, but that's a punt. That's a punt on yourself if you fancy your chances. It's not insider information because politicians generally see the same polling as the public. In fact, often they see it later than the public. But this was different. It was insider trading. It was being told a date of an election before the general public, before the rest of the party. That's the difference. Now, the Labour Party candidate getting dragged into this, Kevin Craig, he's an old sparring partner of mine. You might remember him from this channel. He was often on Jubes & Co. He was a Starmer loyalist, and he was involved in a cash for candidacy hoo-ha, allegedly donated a chunk of money to the Labour Party in return, not in return for, but he was favoured for a seat. He's been suspended from the party. Now, I think this is Sir Keir Starmer acting tough. He's trying to show Sir Keir Starmer, he's trying to show Rishi Sunak, beg your pardon, what Rishi Sunak should have done but didn't. So does it matter to you? Well, there are 2 stories that really cut through in this election campaign. One of them is the D-Day debacle, Rishi Sunak leaving early. That really did bother you, so much so that Rishi Sunak suspended campaigning for a day to let that die down. That cut through. This story, likewise, has cut through. When you go out there and you talk to voters, it's like they earn so much money, politicians. Why do they need to mess around with a few £100 here and there? Insider trading goes down really badly. Now, the other topic I want to ask you about is the football. And again, a lot of people are saying this is really boring. You're right. It is really boring. That's the point. We were promised that we were aiming for the sun. We were promised a golden future. Is part of the problem that the media, the punditry, the FA, the wokerati, the entire establishment were Team Southgate because of his laudable stance, you might think, on anti-racism. When he kicked back over those England stars missing penalties and they got all that online abuse, he became an anti-racism campaigner. He took the knee. He became the king of woke, the patron saint of woke. But is that a football manager's job? Or is it the job to go out there and win football matches? Is it a step too far? Has Southgate bitten off more than he can chew? Should he get the boot? Let me know your thoughts, all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and we're across live to Glastonbury, where people have started to arrive, as you can see, out of one of the world's biggest music festivals. And this year, looks like it won't be a total mudbath. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. First, some breaking news. A woman has reportedly climbed onto the roof of the Conservative Party's election battle bus in Nottinghamshire. She's been named as Amy Rugg-Easy. It's understood she held up a flag reading "Clean Power, not Paddy Power," while displaying the Greenpeace logo. She apparently made it onto the roof of the coach using a ladder. We'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get it. In other news, Julian Assange says it is surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife, Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. A couple who were accused of the manslaughter of their baby daughter will face a retrial. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. A man has been arrested in connection to the so-called honey trap plot that rattled Westminster. It's after an investigation related to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. US President Joe Biden has announced pardons for veterans convicted by the military for engaging in gay sex. Sexual conduct was illegal between service people of the same sex until the law was repealed by President Obama in 2013. It's likely to affect thousands of veterans who were convicted for having consensual relationships. And Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says his wife, the Princess Royal, is recovering slowly. Princess Anne is understood to have been injured by a horse while out walking on her estate on Sunday evening. But she suffered some memory loss, and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt are unknown. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2636 and €1.1831 euros. The price of gold is £1,817 and 40 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,223 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west. As we go through the next 24 hours, as this unseasonably deep low approaches, that's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here, and that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius, so perhaps for some of us another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place, and you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across Northern England, the skies starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. North East Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for Eastern Scotland, but for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Problems in northwest Wales for the A55 westbound, still shut from Llandudno Junction. That's junction 19 all the way through to Madryn Junction 14. Queuing prior to Colwyn Bay at junction 20. Very heavy going at the scene of a serious collision near the Llanfairfechan roundabout. Great Yarmouth, the A149, the eastbound side, just on the Acle-Near Road there, between the Vauxhall roundabout and Fuller's Hill is blocked and queuing. That's due to a bump as well. The clockwise M25 A5 still slow, 25 Enfield to 27. There was a collision that's now clear, but queues to around about a mile before junction 25, very slow through Waltham Cross as well. And in London, the Rotherhithe tunnel still closed both ways and queuing either side of the closure. That's for ongoing emergency repairs. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage. And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. And yes, a quick well done to Nigel Farage, to the Breakfast team, and also Camilla Tominey and Alistair Stewart on those Trick Awards. Richly deserved. Now, later in the show, I'll get expert reaction to Nigel Farage's claim that President Zelensky should hold peace talks with Russia or risk every young Ukrainian man being killed. Now, it's the hottest day of the year in much of England, and surprise, surprise, NHS bosses are warning people that the hot weather could help to cause major disruption to the health service. Temperatures are above 30 degrees in some places, and the UK Health Security Agency has issued yellow health alerts across most of England. And the NHS's National Medical Director, Professor Sir Stephen Powers, says a combination of the heatwave and the 5-day junior doctor strike, which starts tomorrow morning, will hit the NHS very hard. Well, our South East of England reporter, Ray Edison, was out and about in Bognor Regis earlier on.
In terms of the temperatures, they're saying it could get up as high as 30, 31 degrees. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that is a bit hot for, you know, if you can keep in the shade, fair enough. But, no, that's too hot. We're not used to it.
We always wear our hats and sunglasses, but we just don't go out, unless we go out in the car. We don't go out until 3, 4 o'clock, do a bit of gardening, then have another rest, more water. So we're looking after ourselves, putting it that way.
Yes, it's gorgeous, and it's what it should be on the summer day. So lots of people are enjoying, you know, the early reasonable temperature, but it's great.
I thought nice, beautiful opportunity to take advantage of the warm weather and sunshine while it's here.
It looks absolutely beautiful. We've had the wettest spring since Noah's Ark. Surely we can't moan about a bit of heat, although, of course, we've got to take care out there. Beautiful in Bognor Regis. Now, moving on, the Alba Party leader and former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has unveiled his party's manifesto today. And GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is in Dundee. Tony, welcome to the show. With the SNP seemingly having a bit of a wobble, there could be a space there, a niche for a party with a pro-independence referendum. Tony Maguire, tell us more about the Alba Party's pitch.
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. So today was quite late in the day. I think we can all agree the manifesto launch, Alex Salmond taking to the podium and outlining his vision for not just the 2024 general election campaign, but the 2026 Scottish election campaign. Because in a couple of years from now, his hope is that through the Scottish proportional representation system, that Alba will be able to clock in 15% of Scottish MSPs. But certainly between now and then, well, there's in 7 days from tomorrow, there's a poll for Westminster. Now, Neil Hanvey, he's the current Westminster leader of Alba, and he seems to think that the fight is on for a number of seats. The last time I spoke to him, Alba had about 12 candidates lined up, and now they are putting 19 on the ballot papers around Scotland, and indeed around the country, with a lot of people feeling disillusioned by the SNP's drive towards independence, should they themselves support independence. Well, Alba is that true Scottish alternative. Now, I had a chance to even sit down with Alex Salmond a little while after that, and I was a little shocked because he started, following a question from me about the differences north and south of the border this election. He started to draw some comparisons with Reform and being that radical party and being the thorn in the side of the political establishment. And of course, I had to ask him, has he had a flutter? Here's what he said.
Challenger parties take ages to get noticed by the conventional media. Europe is in that situation like before the by-election. We get excluded from everything. Now, once we register results, which we're about to do, then we'll crowd our way in, whether the establishment like it or not. Every political establishment will crowd out every insurgent force, all it can, to keep it off the screens, off the media, to keep it out of sight, out of mind. Of course, for us, we've got this great target that in 2 years' time we have a proportional ballot. Our target is to get 15% of the vote in that ballot, gets 24 MPs, will be part of a nationalist majority in the Scots Parliament, and probably part of the nationalist government.
You had a flutter at this election.
I had a bet, not in politics, but on the horses yesterday when I was campaigning in Maryhill in Glasgow. As an example to these greedy, grasping elements of the Tory party, I'm donating the entire winnings to the Alba Party's campaign fund.
Well, there we have it. We can always rely on Alex Salmond to have a bit of a tongue-in-cheek response at the Conservative Party's expense. But indeed, he was looking quite comfortable. A lot of policies there that Alba has fought tooth and nail for and stood fast beside over the last few years, saving Grangemouth refinery, providing a future for workers in the oil and gas sector, and of course something we have come to know them quite closely over the last 2 years, protecting women's rights. So very interesting to see how much of a dent they make in the electorate next week.
Okay, Tony Maguire, live from Dundee. Thank you very much for that update on the Alba Party's manifesto launch. Thank you. Now we're going to cross live to Tenerife on day 10 of the search for the missing British teenager Jay Slater. Next, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
History lecturers at the University of Liverpool have been advised to problematise whiteness and heterosexuality in their seminars. They are saying that you should be guilty if you're white and heterosexual. Not using the long words they use, but that's kind of what they're saying.
Yeah, but do you know what? History in this country is concerned with more and has been lived by more white people and more heterosexuals, right? And that's the history. I'll tell you something else, Dawn. This is Russell Group University material here. This is Liverpool. It's a really good university. Mm-hmm. The thing that really got me going apart from this, and I thought it was an AI generation of words input into a system to come up with from something. It's ridiculous. The main issue I have is the verb problematise. I've never heard of that before. Yeah. So they should be prioritising grammar. Let's get first principles back in there firstly.
It's just promoting anti-racism.
It's not, Amy.
It is. Wait. It's just bringing the marginalised voices into the discussion. So
no, what they're saying is look at British history through the optic of
all perspectives. So let's look at it from the perspective of a queer person growing up. Let's look at it from the perspective of somebody from...
But that's not the majority.
When I actually looked at the evidence, it's all about unpacking bias. And you have to admit there has been a white bias in history.
No, there hasn't, because the facts...
From a white perspective...
Amy, the facts are, in history, most people in this country are white and heterosexual.
Of course, but then there's still...
So that's the history.
...voices that deserve to be brought into the discussion as much as the dominant...
Look,
like, that's all decolonising the curriculum is hearing all sides of the argument. Surely we at GB News love. We celebrate that. That's what we do.
We do, but we're not telling anybody it's bad to be white or it's bad to be...
Exactly.
That is not what...
Amy, it is. It is.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, go to gbnews.com/election party.
Welcome back. It's 3:47. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. At 4 o'clock, I'll have the latest on the betting scandal. Just how many more Tory and Labour candidates are going to be caught up in this mess? But before that, let's bring you now some breaking news. And the Manchester City midfielder Phil Foden has temporarily left England's Euro 2024 camp and returned home to the UK for what the Football Association, the FA, says is a pressing family matter. Foden started all three of England's group games in Germany, and we'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get more information. Now moving on to the latest on the search for British teenager Jay Slater, who went missing in Tenerife 10 days ago. And the mayor of a town close to where Jay disappeared claims that some locals saw the 19-year-old boy from Lancashire watching games at Euro 2024. And meanwhile, new footage has been released of rescue teams searching for Jay. Let's cross now live to Tenerife and speak to travel writer Joe Crawley. Joe, welcome to the show. Well, the search goes on and the plot thickens. An extraordinary rumour of fresh information backed up by a local mayor. Tell us more.
Yeah, the rumour going around now that a local mayor in the area has seen Jay at in a bar watching the Euro games. Again, unsubstantiated, but this is coming from a member of office, and yeah, you've got to listen. I imagine the police are investigating that area now. I think it was Santiago del Teide, which is the closest town to Mascot, closest large town anyway.
And that is a significant piece of information, but as you say, if it's not substantiated, if it's a bit of hearsay, if there's no actual footage, no actual proof, it could simply be hearsay and could be very distressing to friends and family.
It could. I mean, to be honest, all through this case, there's been a lot of this kind of conspiracy theory or suspicion or what you want to call it, that has upset the family. The family shut down their Facebook page for a while because of all these armchair, if you like, detective kind of suspicions. This could yet be another one, but obviously the police have to follow up on anything and everything because there's really not much to go on at the moment.
But the fact, as you say, that a local mayor, as you say, of Santiago del Teide is backing this up, it gives it a bit of credence and it gives it that substantial body of evidence which makes it seem more trustworthy, more relevant, and yet it seems to be pure hearsay.
Well, it does merely because it is the mayor, like you said, Martin. It has to be looked into, like all leads, I guess. I would imagine that he would have been seen by locals. The police would have been there fairly quickly if he was seen. But like you said, it's kind of bizarre.
OK, Joe Crawley, we're going to have to leave it there. And, of course, we'll come back to you, no doubt, over the forthcoming days as more information comes out. That's Joe Crawley there, live from Tenerife. Thanks for joining us. Now, if your idea of fun is spending 5 days and nights in a field, then maybe you're one of the 200,000 people who are going to this year's Glastonbury Festival. Well, the gates open at 8 o'clock this morning, and already thousands of revellers have set up ahead of the world-famous venue in Somerset. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' South West of England reporter Jeff Moody, who's in the locale. Jeff, welcome to the show. Last time you reported from there, Just Stop Oil had been doing their business. Now, you can't just stop the party. Tell us more.
You most certainly can't. Well, this is as close as I've managed to get. I've been in traffic for most of the day getting this far. The traffic really is horrendous. They're not exaggerating when they say that it's bumper to bumper. But you can just have a look at the tents over in the valley here, glimmering and shimmering in the sunshine. None of that was here this morning. This has all arrived during the course of the day. They're expecting 200,000 people here today. Talking to a lot of the locals, they say there is a slight issue with the fact that you can't get anywhere at this time of year. It's very difficult to make even small hops because the roads really are chock-a-block full of traffic. But there's a good atmosphere. People have been leaning out of their car windows to say hello to me. One woman's just flashed her breasts at me from the window of her bus, which is very nice. That's what happened to me in all the years I've worked in this job, but there you go. But yes, they're all here to see Coldplay and Dua Lipa perform. Some people are saying, well, Coldplay, is that the best you can do this year? But then other people are saying, well, you know, they are Coldplay. They have got quite a reputation, and it's great that they are here. And the sun is shining, and certainly the sun is shining. 27 degrees centigrade for most of the day. They're saying it's going to rise to about 31 as well. Although, for those that love coming to Glastonbury for the mud, there will be some of that later on today as well, because although it's sunny at the moment, we are expecting the rain to pour down later on in the week, and then by about Monday they should be dancing in the mud, which is back to normal, I think.
Superb stuff. Thank you, Jeff Moody, for keeping us abreast of current affairs down there on the site of Glastonbury. You get all the best gigs, mate. Speak to you again soon. Now, I've got a few quick emails come in on topic of Gareth Southgate. Adrian says this: the England game was so boring last night, I fell asleep. Well, Adrian, I didn't even go. I went to a Johnny Rotten gig. I thought the game was rotten enough. Joe says this: Martin, wind your neck in. England are through. You're way too quick to judge. Why can't you just have a bit of faith? Joe, stand corrected if we go on to conquer, but I don't think that's going to happen. But call me a cynic. Michael says this: put them all on performance-related pay, and they would soon pull their socks up. They're paid so much to lose. Where's the incentive to win? Michael, what an excellent point. Norman, what is this obsession with media and pundits berating Southgate? They finished top of the group and you're calling them rubbish. Martin, sit down and shut up. Well, that's me told. Thank you very much. Now, in the last hour, a Greenpeace protester has climbed onto the roof of the Conservative election battle bus in Nottinghamshire. I'll bring you all the latest details very shortly. From there, of course, there's that big debate coming up in Nottingham tonight. Will these debates change anybody's mind? Will they change your mind? Have you already made your mind up? Or are you one of the great undecideds? Well, stand by, because at 5 o'clock, we've got a mega poll landing. That might put a fresh perspective on things. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather. Let's go to Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west. As we go through the next 24 hours, as this unseasonably deep low approaches, that's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here. And that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius. So perhaps for some of us, another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place. And you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across northern England, the skies starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. Northeast Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for eastern Scotland, but for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy, in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. There's a 3-mile queue on the northbound M1, a lane shut around Barnsley northbound junction 36 to 37. There's a shed load there, so that lane closure remains in place. Northbound M6, Sandbach 17 up to Middlewich 18. There's a breakdown, again a lane closure. Very slow northwest Wales, the westbound A55 shut from junction 19 to 14. That's Llandudno junction down to Madryn, queuing prior to Colwyn Bay junction 20 westbound. Along Keys 2 southbound on the A470 into Llanrwst on the diversion as a collision there gets recovered. And the M42 southbound between Tamworth Junction 10 and Coleshill Junction 9 closed and big queues there whilst the lorry fire is being attended to. So very slow on the approaches to the closure. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, the betting scandal rolls on and on, with up to 15 Tories now being investigated by the Gambling Commission. Now a Labour candidate has also been suspended after betting on the Tories to win. Keir Starmer says this is materially different. But does this whole sorry saga show that they're all just in it for themselves? Nigel Farage has doubled down on his controversial remarks on Ukraine, saying President Zelensky should talk peace or risk losing every young Ukrainian man. And with Donald Trump's closest advisors proposing to cut arms to Ukraine to help end the war, if he's elected, is it time to sit down and talk to Putin? And after last night's ball draw with Slovenia, when England fans booed the England manager off the park and lobbed plastic pipe bots at him, is it time to finally admit we need to sack Gareth Southgate? I'll chew that fat with the England, Everton and Rangers legend Trevor Steven. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. So the gambling farce rolls on and on and on. Are you bored of this? Is it a storm in a teacup, or is it actually an indication of politicians simply in it for themselves? Their snouts are in the trough. One rule for them and one rule for us. Gareth Southgate, is he out of his depth? 0-0 a ball draw last night. Just heard that Phil Foden has left the England camp to fly home due to a pressing family matter. Will that make a choice easier for Gareth Southgate to play Bellingham and not Foden? Or is that another thing that simply turns you off? Well, at least the weather's good. Get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. Now it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The news at just after 4 o'clock. The driver of a car that crashed into a school, killing two 8-year-old little girls, will face no criminal charges. Nuria Sajjad and Selena Lau died after the crash at the school in Wimbledon in July last year. It was found the driver had suffered an epileptic seizure behind the wheel. She's expressed her deepest sorrow and said she has no recollection of what took place. The parents of the girls killed said they remain unconvinced that the investigation has been conducted thoroughly and that Nuria and Selena deserved better. Meanwhile, a woman has reportedly climbed onto the roof of the Conservative Party's election battle bus in Nottinghamshire. She's been named as Amy Rug Easy. It's thought that she held up a flag reading "Clean Power, not Paddy Power" while displaying the Greenpeace logo. She apparently climbed onto the roof of the coach using a ladder. Now, Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end yesterday. A warning: the following imagery does contain flashing images if you're watching on TV. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. The Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, thanked the UK and the United States for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
Now, a couple who are accused of the manslaughter of their baby face a retrial in fact. The aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. Both are facing a retrial on other charges. Now, the Scotland Secretary, Alistair Jack, insists he hasn't broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the election. The Cabinet Minister says he had no inside knowledge of when the election would take place, despite previously revealing he'd made more than £2,000 from the bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Tories have taken too long to deal with the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
It's Keir Starmer. Now, Spanish police have released new footage in their search for the missing teenager Jay Slater. It shows a helicopter scouring the mountainous area above Tenerife with search teams on foot, having been joined by sniffer dogs just yesterday. The Guardia Civil say their efforts are not being scaled back. The 19-year-old Brit went missing 10 days ago whilst on holiday on the Spanish island. Early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become a thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. The Liberal Democrats have announced a plan to give every cancer patient a dedicated specialist nurse to support them through their treatment. That would see nearly 3,500 new nurses recruited across England, doubling the existing workforce by the end of the next Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davey, says it's a crucial step towards fixing the NHS.
So waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says his wife, the Princess Royal, is recovering slowly as he left a Bristol hospital after visiting her. The Princess is understood to have been injured by a horse whilst out walking on her estate on Sunday evening, but she suffered some memory loss, and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt aren't known. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now there's loads to get our teeth stuck into, so let's get cracking. And we start with the betting scandal that has cast a huge shadow over this election campaign. Once again, it won't go away. It's just getting bigger and bigger. 2 Tory candidates and 1 Labour candidate have now been suspended by their parties, and it's now being claimed that as many as 15 Conservative candidates and officials are under investigation by the Gambling Commission over bets on the date of the general election. This story just rumbles on and on. I'm now joined by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, until now, this was a scandal that had embroiled the Conservatives. Now the Labour Party have been dragged into it. Kevin Craig, a candidate, astonishingly betting on the Tories to win.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. You couldn't make this stuff up, really, could you? Sir Keir Starmer and the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, were in Leicestershire earlier. I was with them. They wanted to talk about doctors' appointments, but all the questions, of course, about this. Let's take a look first at what Sir Keir Starmer had to say.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week.
So Sir Keir Starmer there, very keen to stress how quickly he had acted in comparison to the Prime Minister, who'd taken 2 weeks to suspend Craig Williams as a candidate. He, of course, had worked in Number 10 very closely with the Prime Minister as his parliamentary private secretary. Sir Keir Starmer also said that he had never placed a political bet, that he only bets on the horses. Also, he doesn't feel that the rules need to change to basically forbid MPs from making bets. So bad for Labour, certainly. I think considerably worse for the Conservatives because of the numbers of people under investigation, because of the very clear suggestion that several of them had inside knowledge, a bit akin to insider trading, clearly out of order. This story is having huge cut through with the public. Now, tonight there will be the final head-to-head debate, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, here in Nottingham, but Labour's problems are not over either, because it has emerged. We heard earlier about the arrest in Islington this morning connected with the Westminster honey trap scandal that broke a couple of months ago, and basically it cost William Ragg, who's then a prominent Conservative MP, the whip, because he had been trapped basically into sending images that he shouldn't have sent to somebody posing as Abby or Charlie. Quite a few MPs and others were targeted. Now, we've never known who was at the bottom of this, but we hear that someone has been arrested, and in the last hour or so we've also heard from the Labour Party. And GB News understands the Labour Party was notified today of the arrest of a party member in Islington. The Labour Party immediately administratively suspended the individual from membership of the party, unable to comment further due to an ongoing police investigation. So we know a Labour Party member suspended in Islington. We know from the police someone was arrested in Islington over these honey trap allegations. So something potentially very bad for Labour coming down the line.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, live from Nottingham ahead of that final leaders' debate. Now let's move on. I'm joined now by Philip Blond, who's a former advisor to David Cameron. Philip, welcome to the show. Here we go again. It's gambling, it's betting, and the honey trap scandal, a fresh suspension there. Doesn't this just paint the picture, David, that politics, just like in the bad old days of the final days of the John Major era, it's just mired in sleaze. Politicians are just in it for themselves. They're up to their necks in it, and the voters are looking on and simply aghast, pulling their hair out. One rule for politicians, one rule for the rest of us.
Well, you might say that. I couldn't possibly comment. But no, of course, you're completely correct. It looks terrible. It is terrible. I'm at a loss myself, just on the gambling point, as to why politicians are allowed to bet on political events when, for example, jockeys are not allowed to bet on horse racing, soccer players are not allowed to bet on the football matches, not just that they play in, but any football match anywhere. And yet we allow politicians to bet on the races they're in, namely the general election. And this isn't difficult. You just simply ban politicians and their staff members from political betting. We do it in other areas, so why not this? And I just find it incredibly odd that nobody has stepped forward, either Labour or Conservative, to essentially swiftly undertake to enact that if they form the next government.
But that's just not workable. I mean, politicians routinely place bets on themselves. I bet myself 3 times. I won 1 and lost 2. I didn't trouble the bookies very much. Philip Blond, if you never placed a bet on politics, surely you have. Everyone does.
For the general public, of course, but there's no reason. If you genuinely want to uphold the comments you made earlier, and I agree with those comments, it is quite easy to prevent politicians or their staff from betting on political races or political outcomes. I repeat, we do it for jockeys, we do it for soccer players, we do it for cricket players because it gives them an unfair advantage. There's also the case that we have a police officer who's been arrested for misconduct in public office, and the law isn't that vague on this. It's a criminal offence to bet with inside information. Yet the Gambling Commission's inquiries don't seem to be running in parallel with police inquiries. So if we're serious, Martin, about eliminating the two-tier system, then it's very easy, or it's as difficult as banning football players to ban politicians from placing bets. I don't really see the problem. Now, the other interesting thing is this latest issue about the honey trap affair, which in some ways is much more serious because it's a national security affair. We essentially had somebody blackmail William Bragg, who promptly gave up the names of everyone he could, and compromised many other MPs. And if we make 2 and 2 = 4, it appears that this criminal act was undertaken by a Labour Party member. So
No. There has been no criminal activity. There's a suspension of a party activist. Let's be absolutely clear.
I agree.
Only arrested at the moment. Allegations. Let's be careful.
Yes, I'm saying, well, we know that whoever was blackmailing William Bragg is a criminal activity. And then we have this very odd announcement that a Labour Party member's been suspended and somebody's been arrested. So if those events are related, and we don't know that they are, then that's potentially a very, very serious matter indeed. And that then suggests that far from it being a foreign kind of spy operation, is something much closer to home.
OK, we have to leave it there. Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, moving on, Princess Anne is recovering slowly in hospital after suffering concussion and minor head injuries. Her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, went to visit Her Royal Highness in hospital, where she's since been involved in a horse-related incident. He spoke to reporters as he left.
Do you expect her out today, sir? Do you expect her out today?
She will be out when she's ready.
Thank you.
Well, GBNews' royal correspondent Cameron Walker is outside Buckingham Palace. Cameron, welcome to the show. What's the latest?
Well, Martin's Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, the Princess Royal's husband, visited his wife in hospital this afternoon. It's the Southmead Hospital in Bristol. It's understood to be the nearest major trauma centre close to the Princess Royal's Gloucestershire home, where she sustained those injuries on Sunday night, thought to be involving a horse. A medical team saying that her injuries are consistent with impact from the horse's head or a horse's leg. But as you just heard there in that video clip, Sir Tim told reporters that she's recovering slowly and she'll be out when she is ready, suggesting the princess will not be out of hospital today. She has concussion and minor injuries, according to Buckingham Palace. At the time of this announcement on Monday, the Buckingham Palace said she's expected to make a full and I quote, swift recovery, different to what Sir Tim is saying this afternoon, recovering slowly. I suspect we don't need to read too much into that. The reason being, the statement we had on Monday would have been a very carefully worded, very carefully crafted statement before it was released to the world, whereas Sir Tim appears to be ambushed by journalists a little bit outside the hospital in Bristol this afternoon. The princess, of course, a keen horsewoman. She rode in the 1976 Montreal Olympics, but she is 73 years old and she has sustained a pretty nasty injury to to the head. We know that she doesn't remember the incident itself. She has concussion. It's a medical team saying what they think has happened. We don't know if she was alone when she sustained these injuries on Sunday evening. We know an air ambulance was called and a road ambulance, but she was not taken to hospital in the air ambulance. She was taken via road, suggesting it wasn't a very urgent injury, but albeit serious enough to warrant being in hospital for at least 3 days.
Thank you, Cameron Walk, for the update there on the Princess Royal from Buckingham Palace. Now I'm about to be joined by a senior cabinet minister, and I'll ask him straight, is there any way back for the Conservatives in this general election campaign? And did you have a flutter on the date of the general election? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
The mystery surrounding the disappearance of flight MH370 has perplexed the planet now for 10 years. But now all of a sudden researchers at Cardiff University have piped up and said, oh, we heard a beep. Aerospace engineer, founder of MH370search.com is Richard Godfrey. Richard, are we going to find this thing?
The new research is much more thorough and gone in much more detail. It is picking up acoustic waves under the water. It's not conclusive, but it's a good step forward.
Is this a cover-up job of epic proportions? Do you think something quite sinister happened to this plane? Because it is all very odd.
I think you're right. It is all very odd. It is. We have a lot of data, but we don't have the final analysis, and we won't until we actually find the wreckage. The Indian Ocean is a huge place, 77 million square kilometers. When we find the plane, we can recover the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder. We can learn a lot more.
Do you think someone might have shot it down?
No, the plane flew until it ran out of fuel. The plane was perfectly in working order. There was an active pilot right until the end. So my only theory at the moment is the captain of the plane actually committed a hijack of his own plane. But until we find it, we won't be able to prove that.
We are potentially a step closer now to knowing and to one of the greatest mysteries of recent times anyway, finally being solved. There's aerospace engineer there, Richard Godfrey. Thank you.
Britain's election channel, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Don't miss our big interview with the Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey. He speaks to our political editor Chris Hope in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special. And that's from 7 o'clock this evening here on GB News. Now let's get more now ahead of the general election, which is just 8 days away now. Are you still with us? I'm joined by the Deputy Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell. Andrew, welcome to the show. So I've bet on myself 3 times on politics. I even won 1 time. Have you ever had a political flutter?
You know, I'm not a great a bettor and a gambler, and I can't remember when I last placed a bet, but I can remember that whenever I have placed a bet, I've almost always lost.
OK. So you're admitting at that point he froze up. He admitted, and in fact, Ed Davey in 2010 said he bet on the Lib Dems to win, and he said, I'm a serial loser. So perhaps there, Andrew, you have more in common with Ed Davey than perhaps you'd like to confess. But on a serious point, Andrew, the Conservatives now consistently 20 points behind in the polls. Nothing seems to be budging that. This betting hoo-ha, this latest scandal cannot be helping at all. Is there any way the Conservatives can dig themselves out of this hole now?
What we have to do is recognise that the British public are facing a choice here. There is a choice. Conservatives are always, by instinct, low taxers, people who try to reduce tax when it's responsible and safe to do so. Labour is the opposite. It always used to be said that dogs bark, cats meow, and Labour puts up taxes. And what Conservatives have to do is to make sure that the choice at this election is understood. Millions of people are going to vote Conservative on July the 4th. And the job of all of us is to try and make the point about this choice so that the country can decide. Because, you know, the betting scandal will be gone and will be forgotten within a few days. But once you've elected a government on July the 4th, you're saddled with it for 5 years. And we need to make sure that people understand that choice and that Conservatives explain what we would want to do. We have a clear plan and that the country can make that choice.
But isn't that the point, though, Andrew Mitchell? There's been scant analysis of Labour's policies. Sir Keir Starmer has got away more or less scot-free on that front because it seems there's a continual set of circumstances, Conservative own goals that you're simply handing to the opposition, which means that conversation doesn't happen. The D-Day debacle was a disaster, and now the betting hoo-ha rolls on and on and on, and each time a precious day is ticked off as we head towards the general election. Isn't that an exercise in just self-imposed disaster?
Well, this is my 11th general election, and I've never known a general election that went particularly smoothly. And I remember also some of those elections where things went very seriously awry. But, you know, in Birmingham, in my constituency, but in a lot of constituencies across the Birmingham conurbation, we've had Labour in government. They've been governing Britain's second city, just as they govern in Wales. And we've seen the effect of that sort of Labour government. In Birmingham, they've bankrupted the city. They put up the council tax by 21%. They're closing 3 out of 4 libraries. A whole series of things. There are cuts in service of £300 million. That is what happens in Labour governments. They always leave the country in a much less strong economic position when they leave government. No Labour government has ever left office without putting up unemployment. And we see it day in, day out in the Birmingham area, the effect of Labour government, taxes rising, services being cut. And we're very worried about it.
But Andrew, it's fair to say we've never been in bigger debt. We're £2.7 trillion in debt. That dwarfs the debt that David Cameron inherited in 2010. You talk about the Conservatives being the party of low tax. We have the highest taxes since World War II. It's easy to criticise the opposition, but you've had 14 years to get this right, and yet we stand in a perilous situation in terms of debt and taxation.
Well, the rises in tax and the rises in debt have taken place during the last Parliament, in particular because of COVID, where I think the government did exactly the right thing in protecting livelihoods and jobs and people's living standards through the furlough scheme. It cost us £400 billion. It was very, very expensive, but I think it was the right thing to do. That's why taxation and debt are so high. But who can doubt that the instincts of the Conservatives are to lower tax when it is responsible to do so? So the instincts of Labour are to raise tax. And that's why I talk about the choice in the general election. We've got to make sure that people, our constituents, those whose votes we're after, understand there is a choice, because once the choice is made on July the 4th, it will continue for 5 years. And I think were there to be a massive Labour landslide, the country would not be well governed. Governments need to be held to account. They need powerful oppositions. And it's very, very important that we make sure that this choice is understood before people vote on July the 4th.
Now, Andrew, if you were a gambling man, how big a supermajority do you think that the Labour Party may get? Some of the polls have been coming in, are placing the Conservative Party on 53 seats, a wipeout.
Well, you know, we've had a real election in the Birmingham area where Labour, as I say, has been in government. And just in the last couple of weeks, and that saw a swing to the Conservatives of 6%. So that was a real election and not a poll. But as I said, my record in betting is so awful that I wouldn't be taking a bet on any of that speculation.
OK, well, all bets will be off in 8 days' time. Andrew Mitchell, thanks for joining us on the show, Deputy Foreign Secretary. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, and I'll ask whether Nigel Farage is correct to say that the Ukraine should seek peace talks with Russia. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour: the driver of a car that crashed into a school, killing 2 8-year-old girls, will face no criminal charges. Nuria Sajjad and Selena Lau died after the crash at their school in Wimbledon in July last year. It was found the driver had suffered an epileptic seizure behind the wheel, and she's expressed her deepest sorrow and said she has no recollection of what took place. The parents of the girls killed said they remain unconvinced that the investigation has been conducted thoroughly, saying the 2 girls deserved better. Let's just bring you some news just in. A woman has reportedly climbed onto the roof of the Conservative Party's election battle bus in Nottinghamshire. She's been named as Amy Rugg-Easy. It's understood she held up a flag reading "Clean Power, not Paddy Power" while displaying the Greenpeace logo. Now, Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end yesterday. A warning if you're watching on television, the following does contain some flashing imagery. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down on Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. Here in the UK, a couple who are accused of the manslaughter of their baby daughter will face a retrial. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter, Victoria, was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. A man has been arrested in connection with a honey trap plot in Westminster. It's after an investigation related to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. And Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says his wife, the Princess Royal, is recovering slowly. Princess Anne's understood to have been injured by a horse whilst out walking on her Gloucestershire estate on Sunday evening. She has suffered some memory loss, and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt aren't yet known. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. Those are the headlines. For the latest, scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out a few of the comments, the best of them, a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west as we go through the next 24 hours as this unseasonably deep low approaches. That's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here, and that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius, so perhaps for some of us another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place. And you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across northern England, the skies starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. Northeast Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for eastern Scotland, but for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Eastbound M62 Tarbock Island Junction 6 towards Warrington Road at Junction 7. All the traffic on stop. There's a vehicle fire there causing delays in both directions. North Wales westbound A55 remains shut Junction 19. Llandudno Junction all the way down to Madryn at 14. Queuing prior to Colwyn Bay at 20. A collision just off the Llanfair Fechan roundabout still being recovered. 2 lanes shut northbound up the M6. Rugby Junction 1 up to Coventry at 2. There's queues at the scene of a collision. Now the M42 southbound between Tamworth at 10 and Junction 9 closed. Long delays for vehicle fire. A lane shut on the northbound side as well. And the southbound M5, all the traffic being held for emergency barrier repairs. So queues around the Wellington turn off Junction 26. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:37. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now to more controversial remarks from Nigel Farage on Ukraine. And the leader of Reform UK has said President Zelensky should talk peace or risk losing every young Ukrainian man. And his comments come a few days after Mr Farage said the West provoked Russia's invasion of Ukraine by expanding the European Union and NATO eastwards. Well, joining now to discuss this is the former NATO commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Does Nigel Farage have a point? Is there any circumstance, Chris Parry, where you feel we should think about ending what looks like could be a forever war and actually have some peace talks, or is that simply not on the table?
Well, it's up to the Ukrainians and the Russians, really, Martin. I think we need to reflect that the sort of scale of warfare that's going on along the front line in Ukraine is just like that used to happen during the Second World War. So it could go on for another couple of years. But my sense is that I think they're basically fighting themselves into a stalemate. And I think along the sort of lines we're seeing now, they'll start talking to each other by the end of the year.
And Chris Parry, talking about the end of the year, of course, there's a huge election coming up over the pond in America. Donald Trump is looking pretty favourable over there. And yesterday, 2 of his former chiefs of staff laid out their plans to cut arms supplies to the Ukraine to help end the war. Donald Trump always said, we'll have this war over in 24 hours. A lot of bluster, no detail. Now they're saying that they're going to stop arms going out there, use that as a window for Putin to sit down and have peace talks or ramp up the armaments to Ukraine. So with the threats of the arms being pulled out from the biggest supplier of them, the USA, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, is that also a key factor?
Not going to happen, Martin. The fact of life is, whether you're a cynic or a realist, we've managed to flypaper Russia in Ukraine. And as long as Ukraine wants to fight for its independence, it's incredibly convenient for Russia to be bogged down there. I heard an American general say recently that, for the sake of 5% of American defense budget, we're actually depleting 75% of Russia's fighting power. I hate to say it, but that's a good deal for the free world. Whether Ukraine can actually stand the strain, the pressure on its economy, its society for much longer, I'm not sure. But what we've got to start thinking about is, if Russia does want to come to the table, on what possible terms is Ukraine going to feel secure after that peace, with Russia still hovering in the background, rearming, still murdering people in its occupied provinces.
And yet, Chris Parry, when Nigel Farage talked about brokering some form of peace talks, Boris Johnson said the comments were morally repugnant, a Kremlin propagandist. But you're saying that perhaps is the most likely route, because both sides grinding each other into the ground. Do we need to put this tribalism, this binary choice to one side, and just say sometimes perhaps you do need to negotiate with your foe?
What tends to happen in these things, you look in history, Martin, whenever these two sides or any people are involved in a war, they get in a sort of very restricted mental box where the possibilities actually narrow down to very, as you say, binary choices. That's the situation they're in right now. What would change that? If there's a breakthrough on the front, Russia has a collapse of confidence, there's a mutiny in the Russian army, all those things could happen. So what we're waiting for is an event that will actually break people out of this mental box. I think the Russians tried it with the most recent assault up near Kharkiv. That hasn't happened. I was saying at the start of the year that once the campaigning season is over, I think there'll be talk of coming to terms, because I think Russia's feeling it. There's no question about that. Just on the Farage comments, Martin, it didn't take much to provoke Putin. The fact of life is, if you walk down the street and you're confronted by a lunatic, you're going to provoke him, whether you're reasonable or not. The fact of life is, Putin wanted Ukraine for its resources, oil and gas, agricultural products. He also wanted to absorb as many of the population as he could, because he's got a declining population in Russia. So whatever Nigel said, and he's normally a very good communicator, and I think he probably messed it up here. The fact of life is, Putin was going to do what he wanted to do regardless of what NATO or the EU were doing. So it's a slightly fatuous argument by politicians at the moment.
OK, well, thanks for joining us, giving us your expert insights. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Former NATO Commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Thank you very much. Now it's the final week to see how you could win our summer giveaway. 15 grand tax-free cash and a whole host of treats on top. Now, lines close at 5 p.m. this Friday, so make sure that you don't miss out. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, cash? Text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Still to come, I'll be talking about England's snore draw last night in the Euros. Was I right last week when I said it's time to sack Gareth Southgate? Well, I'll be putting that to former England and Everton legend Trevor Steven next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War, restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, go to gbnews.com/election party.
Now, don't miss our big interview with the Liberal Democrats leader, Sir Ed Davey. He'll speak to our political editor, Chris Hope, in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special, and that's from 7 p.m. this evening here on GB News. Now, a reminder of that breaking news on the England squad, and the Manchester City midfielder Phil Foden has temporarily left England's Euro 2024 camp and returned to the UK for what the Football Association says is a pressing family matter. Now, Foden started all 3 of England's group games in Germany so far, and we'll bring you more on that story as we get more information. But I'm afraid let's get back to last night. And England failed to win again. Another snooze fest from the muted 3 Lions, or should I say, the lame Lions. Yes, the 0-0 draw against Slovenia, the mighty Slovenia, is nothing more than what I expected. I said it last week and I'll say it again. In my opinion, it's time to get rid of Gareth Southgate. Well, let's talk to a bloke now who knows a lot more about football than me, a mere armchair pundit. So I'm joined now by the England, Everton and Rangers legend, Trevor Stephen. Trevor, what a player you were. A delight to have you on the show. Now, of course, the media, fans, they always get frustrated during big tournaments. Before we get to Gareth Southgate, you were playing under Bobby Robson, who went on to be remembered as an absolute legend, almost deified. And yet, Trev, when we look back in time, the media were always on Bobby's back. They were saying, in the name of God, go. In the name of Allah, go. They even said at one point, as a player, Trev, what's it like playing in those circumstances where the media, the fans are always on the gaffer's back?
Oh, it's not easy. You try not to react to it in any way. And of course, Bobby Robson, he would protect us, as you would expect. He wasn't friends with the media. They weren't particularly keen on him. But of course, when you look at his record, it was very good. Quarter-final and semi-final of World Cups. So I think we need to put it into perspective. I know you're claiming that Gareth Southgate should go, but midway through a tournament, you certainly don't want to be contemplating that. And I think we're misreading it slightly. If you look at all of the qualifying campaigns that we have done or competed in over the various campaigns, we always struggle. We seem to finish their league season and then find difficulty in getting a rhythm together. But we do eventually find our feet in general. And certainly under Gareth, we've done that in the main. We've got better in tournaments. I think what disappointed England fans last night was the inability to score against Slovenia. But historically, they've always been a bit difficult for us. We have won 5 out of 6 against Slovenia. But only by 1 goal, so it was always going to be tight. And we didn't take our chances at the right moments in the game. If Saka's tap-in goal from Phil Foden hadn't been ruled offside, just wonder what that game would have looked like, going through the 90 minutes. But anyway, that didn't happen. Better second half, certainly. First half was very, very disappointing. I was watching it in a pub with some mates last night, and it was surprisingly dull atmosphere because the England team is not exciting. It's not exciting. As we're seeing it now, it's not exciting the public. But we know we've got players as individuals who are terrific players. And Jude Bellingham, for instance, unfortunately, is just looking like the season's caught up with him somewhat, and he's looking a bit tired. But the qualifying is over, Martin, and that's the main thing. We're now into a different stage, a different test, Jeopardy football, cup final football, and that's what is going to be interesting from here on in.
Now, Trev, you're being very diplomatic. I'd expect no less. But let's be honest. Jude Bellingham, the best player in the Spanish league, certainly one of the very best. In Harry Kane, the best player, the best striker in the Bundesliga. And we saw with Phil Foden voted the best player in the Premier League. And yet, when they're put under Southgate's stewardship, they vanish. They're disappearing. They disappear into mediocrity. And at that point, Trev, the buck's got to stop with the gaffer.
Yeah, there's a mix of things here. Certainly, Gareth Southgate has. He's not put this team on the field to work in a fluid way. And you can see that in the body language, in the facial expressions of the players. You can see that there's something amiss here, and they're not comfortable with what they're doing, or unsure as to what they're doing, and we run aground, after 20, 30 minutes of a game. But to put Southgate out of the tournament at this point would be counterproductive. I do want to just define the difference between qualifying, the qualifying stage, and we have qualified with most points in the group, and we topped the group, which has given us a great in towards the final in the later stages, of course. But the problem is, in fact, no, it's not the problem, it's the complete opposite. Now we've got this cup final approach where we have to win over 90 minutes or extra time or penalties. So there are outcomes now where it was chess games, qualification is like that sometimes. And I've experienced them myself. I played in 2 Euros and we didn't get out of the group. England are doing something okay. They collected the points. It was a poor group as well, wasn't it? I mean, quality-wise. But we can put that behind us.
OK, Trevor Stephen, I truly admire your optimism, and I was with you there until you mentioned the P word. You had to mention penalties. Now, Trev, my heart's in my mouth. Look, it's a delight to talk to you. You take care, Captain. Thanks for your company. Now, at 5 o'clock, coming up shortly, I'll bring the results of a big new opinion poll ahead of next week's general election. Find out whether the Tories can eat into the Labour Party's lead, or if Rishi Sunak's party are still on course to be thrashed. And what about reform? We'll find out shortly. I'm Austin Daubney on GB News, British News Channel. Now's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west. As we go through the next 24 hours, as this unseasonably deep low approaches, that's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here. And that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius. So perhaps for some of us, another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place. And you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across northern England, the skies starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. Northeast Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for eastern Scotland, but for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy, in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's still queues for the M62 eastbound Junction 6 Tarbock Island towards Warrington Road towards Junction 7, though the earlier vehicle fire has now been dealt with. Very slow in North Wales for the westbound A55. It's closed from Llandudno Junction, that's Junction 19 to Madryn at 14. Queuing prior to Colwyn Bay Junction 20, a collision just off the Llanfair Fechan roundabout still being recovered. Queues for the M42 southbound shut Tamworth at 10 down towards Coleshill at Junction 9 for lorry fire. That means queues northbound 2 back to Junction 8 and a lane closure in place. Junctions 9 up to 10. Queuing southbound for the M5 around Wellington 26. A lane shut for emergency repairs and stop start for half an hour anti-clockwise on the M25 towards the Dartford tunnels. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel. On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex, and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment, and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Breaking news this hour, a major new opinion poll says Labour will win next week's general election with a massive 250-seat majority. Now, it's terrible news for the Tories, and it gets even worse for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as this poll predicts he'll lose his seat. It also forecasts that the Liberal Democrats will become the official opposition and beats the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in his constituency. And the poll's predicting a breakthrough moment for Reform UK. It says Nigel Farage's party will win 18 seats. Full analysis is coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So we're about to dive into the latest opinion poll, an astonishing set of results. The gap is widening with the Labour Party. Liberal Democrats have performed incredibly well in this poll, and the breakthrough moment, the Reform Party, according to this poll, sets to win 18 seats. We'll have more analysis of the vote share, what it means, and have Reform gone now officially into second place on the vote share. You will not want to miss the full analysis on all of this and what it all means for the country moving forward. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But before we dive into this poll, these astonishing results, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
And the news this hour, the driver of a car that crashed into a primary school in London, killing two 8-year-old girls, will face no criminal charges. Nouria Sajjad and Selena Lau died after the crash at a school in Wimbledon in July last year. It was found the driver had suffered an epileptic seizure behind the wheel. She's expressed her deepest sorrow and said she has no recollection of what took place. The parents of the girls killed say they remain unconvinced that the investigation has been conducted thoroughly and that the girls deserve better. Meanwhile, Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end yesterday. A warning if you're watching on TV, TV. The following does contain some flashing imagery. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today. He was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. The Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, thanked the UK and the United States for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment, his landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
The Scotland Secretary, Alistair Jack, insists he hasn't broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the election. The Cabinet Minister says he had no inside knowledge of this when the election would take place, despite previously revealing he'd made more than £2,000 from the bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week to go until voters head to the polls. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Tories have taken too long to deal with the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
Spanish police have released new footage in their search for the missing British teenager Jay Slater. If you're watching on television, take a look at these aerial shots taken from a hospital scouring the mountainous area involved. Search teams on foot below, having been joined by sniffer dogs just yesterday. The Guardia Civil locally say their efforts aren't being scaled back. They're still looking for Jay, who went missing 10 days ago while on holiday on the Spanish island. Here in the UK, early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become a thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and even dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says the Princess Royal is recovering slowly as he left a Bristol hospital after visiting his wife. Princess Anne is understood to have been injured by a horse while out walking on her estate in Gloucestershire on Sunday evening, but she suffered some memory loss and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt aren't known. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. Just a last note for you about the England squad. Phil Foden has left the Euro 2024 camp to return home for the birth of his 3rd child. It's home the Man City midfielder will be back in time for Sunday's last 16 clash in Germany. He started all 3 of England's Group C matches as Gareth Southgate's side advanced by finishing top of the group. We wish him and his family well. That's the news. For the latest stories, sign up for GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, there's only one place to start this hour, and that's with the latest major opinion poll to predict that the Tories are heading for electoral wipeout next week. An MRP poll of more than 19,000 people says Labour will win with a majority of 250. And it predicts that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, would lose his seat as the Liberal Democrats overtake the Conservatives and become the official opposition. Let's go through the key figures now. And the poll has Labour winning 450 seats, And as I just said, there's the Liberal Democrats getting more MPs than the Tories, with Ed Davis' party on 71. The Conservatives, meanwhile, are on just 60. And next comes the SNP on 24. And the poll projects that Reform will win 18 seats, and the Greens and Plaid Cymru have 4 seats each. And next, when it comes to the share of the vote, well, Labour, as you can see, are on 40% of the vote, and they're followed in second place by Reform on 18%, 2 percentage points ahead of the Conservatives on 16 in third. And then comes the Liberal Democrats on 13%, with the Greens on 8%. Now, the poll also predicts that a total of 22 cabinet ministers will lose their seats at the general election, and they include the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, and also Kemi Badenoch, who's the favourite with bookmakers to be the next Conservative leader. Well, I'm now joined by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, quite a set of figures to go through here. Let's pick through the top lines. The biggest line is a widening gap between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, if you believe the polls, with a record majority predicted here for the Labour Party.
That's right. Hi, Martin. Yeah, you've got 250 majority for the Conservative, for the Labour Party, forgive me, with the Tory Party pushing to third place with just 60 MPs. They're going backwards from where they were in a similar electoral calculus find out now poll that we revealed on GB News at the start of the campaign. Back then it was around 72 Tory MPs, now down to 60. It may show the impact of the resurgent Reform UK party under Nigel Farage. Of course, since then we have had a few missteps by this campaign run by Rishi Sunak. The D-Day issue coming back early for a media again was widely criticised by his own side for that. And then, of course, the gambling gate story ongoing. A couple of candidates have had their support withdrawn by Rishi Sunak. He's been embattled because of that. So he hasn't had the best of luck or the best of campaigns, frankly, for the Tory Prime Minister. The eye-catching thing, though, the Liberal Democrats become the official opposition, according to this polling by electoral calculus and find out now. Reform UK get, wait for it, 18 MPs. You'll see Nigel Farage in the House of Commons, Richard Tice, he'll be in the House of Commons, Lee Anderson. These are names you'd never have thought would have happened before Nigel Farage chose to come back as the party's leader just 3 or 4 short weeks ago. Labour's best result since the 1930s, the Tories' worst one since 1900. History made across the board, 22 cabinet ministers to lose their seats. That's virtually the entire cabinet losing their seats. Who's left? James Cleverly, Home Secretary, Steve Barclay, the Environment Secretary, Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, Lucy Fraser, Laura Trott, Tom Tugendhat, Mike Tomlinson, the Immigration Minister. Not many. Also, don't forget Jeremy Corbyn. He wins Islington North from Labour. So a quite extraordinary set of results here. Again, the only poll that matters, as I'm sure we'll hear from the Tories tonight when they see this poll, is July the 4th. That's Thursday next week. But people are voting now. 1 in 5 of us vote in postal ballots, and so that'll be a worry, I think, that these numbers are coming out. This poll between the 14th of June and the 24th of June. That's just yesterday, Martin. So a shocking poll here for the Tory party, and alarming maybe for Labour. I was walking into this venue here, and I'm now in the spin room getting ready for the two-way debate, the final head-to-head debate between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. And one senior Labour figure said to me they are very worried, he said, that they wake up on Friday next week to an almighty shock, and these polls are all wrong. So right now, Labour is worried that these polls forecasting a supermajority for the Labour Party are wrong. But as things stand, they're all saying the same thing. Either the pollsters are wrong, or Labour's in for an enormous shock next week.
Now, of course, polls are polls. No polls predicted Brexit. No polls predicted Donald Trump would get elected. And yet, Chris, we are seeing a trend emerging. And it seems to be a trend of a widening majority, a decreasing of the Conservative vote, and as you said, an increase in Liberal Democrats and an increase in the Reform vote. With each poll that goes, the Reform have been cast to get 0 seats in a YouGov poll and in a Telegraph poll, and then it was 5 seats, beg your pardon, in YouGov, and now 18 in this poll. There seems to be 3 trends in parallel there going on, Chris, and maybe across this many polls, there's something in this movement.
Well, there might be, but looking at the breakdown of the share of the vote, 40% vote Labour, 20% vote Conservative, 11% vote Lib Dems, and they get 71 MPs, 18% vote Reform, and they get 18 MPs. Now, this is why you're hearing from Nigel Farage calls for some form of electoral reform. Why is it that you can get, a third less, according to this, in vote share than the Liberal Democrat, more than Liberal Democrats, forgive me, but get a fraction of their MPs, and that's not fair, they would say. The reason why that is, of course, is that Reform UK, a relatively new party, a rebadged Brexit party from 2019, doesn't know where voters are, Martin. The older parties are Tories, Lib Dems and Labour. They know where the voters live. They know what doors to knock on, remind Mrs Miggins at number 42 Acacia Avenue to make sure she votes, know where to go, because not a lot of people move around between elections. Reform UK has no idea where they are. If they get 18 MPs, I do find that very extraordinary, because that'll mean that essentially a social media campaign with no idea where any of their supporters live has gone from 0 to 18 MPs. Now, given the Liberal Democrats are around a dozen or so, and they've been around, well, in their current form, since the early 90s or late 80s, I find 18 MPs extraordinary and historic for a challenger party.
Hey, Chris Hope, thanks for joining us there live from the Spin Room in Nottingham, my home city. Thanks for joining us, as always. And now let's cross to the poll was conducted by Find Out Now and Electoral Calculus. And the founder and the CEO of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter, joins me now on the show. Martin, always a delight to have you on the show. An eye-opening set of results here, Martin Baxter, but one that seems to follow recent trends, and those trends typically seem to be a widening majority for the Labour Party, a decreased vote share for the Conservatives, an increased vote share for the Liberal Democrats, and likewise a resurgent Reform Party. Martin, talk us through.
Well, you could summarise it, Martin, as this is the oh no election. That many voters are saying oh no to the Conservatives, and that's reflected in the fact that Labour, not just in our poll, but in many polls, are now predicted to get more than 400 seats. But also there's a little bit of oh no with respect to Labour as well, and that's why we're seeing the growth of parties which are neither Conservative nor Labour. So the Lib Dems are up, Reform are up, even the Greens and Plaid are up as well. So one interesting fact is that although Labour are predicted to win with a massive majority, we calculate that Keir Starmer's Labour Party would get 1 million fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party did in 2017. So that shows that although Labour are doing very well, it's slightly grudging. But that doesn't take away from the fact that they are on course for a big majority, and the Conservatives are looking at a very bad situation.
And Martin Baxter, in terms of the vote share, the Reform vote share at its highest in this poll, the Labour Party just holding firm on 40%, the Conservatives being nibbled downwards, Lib Dems doing very well, and some of the big names on this hit list, Martin Baxter, when we're looking ahead to the re-emergence of who might be the future Conservative leader. Kemi Badenoch, who's doing the rounds in the newspapers today, saying that she's a name fancied in this poll. Martin, she's down to lose her seats, as are some other big names. Talk us through who's on the hit list.
Well, as you say, yes, from the Prime Minister downwards, most of the Cabinet, most Conservative MPs are in trouble on polling like this. It's worth remembering that there is no floor in British politics under the first past the post system until you get to 0. 0 is the least the Conservatives could get to, but if things decline further, then they could get towards that. On the other hand, it could be better for the Conservatives than that. That there's quite a lot of uncertainty into exactly how bad it will be for the Conservatives. We've got a vote seat range going from about 40 up to 200. So and the 60 figure is the one we think is the most likely, is the central case. But there could be surprises all along the way. But if it's anything like our poll, it's going to be a very bad night for the Conservatives next Thursday.
And there's this pincer movement, Martin Bax, we've talked about all along, the pincer movement of the Liberal Democrat in the blue wall, nibbling away at those more rural votes, the kind of sewage constituencies, as it were, the NIMBY votes, and then the pincer movement of the Reform Party. The Conservatives seem to have all but given up on even campaigning in the red wall. Is that what you're detecting here, Martin, a kind of two-pronged attack on the Conservative vote by both the Liberal Democrats and Reform UK?
It's another way of thinking about it is Conservative voters moving away from the Conservative Party in all directions. We did an interesting poll a few weeks ago asking Conservative defectors what their reasons were in their own words. And the biggest reason was that people felt the Conservative government had failed. And some people were going to Labour and the Lib Dems, some people going to Reform, some people just staying at home and not voting. But the Conservatives have, a massive reputational problem at the moment, which frankly really couldn't have been solved in 6 weeks of the campaign. And I think we've seen that play out, that the 14 years of government leaves a government tired, and the public perception is very negative. And I think that's been very difficult to throw off.
Now, Martin Baxter, one final question. It's just a poll. I know it's your poll, no disrespect, but there are lots of polls. They've been quite varied in their output. But do you think there's enough in this trend now to not predict with accuracy the seat number, but there's enough of a trend, there's enough of a driving force now to point towards this supermajority, to point towards people looking for something different in politics in Britain?
Yeah, well, I'd say if you look at the other MRP polls by people who've conducted MRP polls before, there's quite a lot of similarity actually on the Labour seat total. It's around about 420 to 450. So and remember, Labour needs 326 for a majority. So anything over 400 is very large indeed. So there's on the whole consensus amongst the experienced MRP pollsters that Labour are set to win. Where, again, I'll make the point that the Conservative seat total is more uncertain. There's more uncertainty in that. It could be lower than we say, it could be higher than we say. And that will obviously make a lot of difference to some cabinet ministers personally. But the general impression from the polling is that Labour are going to win. Now, of course, the polls have been wrong before. In 1992, the polls predicted that Neil Kinnock would win with the Labour Party, and that did not happen. So you never know. And as Chris Hope said earlier, the only votes that really count are the actual votes in the ballot box next Thursday.
Yeah, a fascinating set of results, and thank you for sharing them with us. And that's the founder and the CEO of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter. Martin, thanks for your time. Always a pleasure. Now, get lots more on that result, on the set of results of that major new opinion poll on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis you come to expect from GB News. So get stuck in. Now it's the final week to see how you could win our summer giveaway. £15,000, tax-free, and a whole host of treats on top. Now lines close at 5 p.m. this Friday, so make sure that you don't miss out. Here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, Rishi Sunak isn't the only major leader who might live to regret calling an election this summer, because it's all going Pete Tong for Emmanuel Macron before they go to the polls in France this Sunday. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So there was a calf that was run down by a Surrey police car. It's now being nursed back to health, according to the family who own the farm that the calf escaped from.
Well, he didn't just run him over once, he ran him over twice.
No, we're not showing you the footage. The footage is really shocking. But the police officer who was driving this vehicle has now been taken off frontline duties until a full investigation is completed. And I feel like I'm yet again the only person in the country who thinks the police officer was just doing his job. That police officer, probably a young guy who's got dual carriageways left, right and centre in that area. Do you know what the most popular business is in that area in Feltham?
Farming.
McDonald's drive-through. It's got a queue round the block anytime you go around that area. And all those people queuing for McDonald's who are now outraged that this poor cow had to die.
Because it's going to be at McDonald's at some point.
At some point he was going to die. I'm really sorry. If you eat meat, you can't be upset by a cow dying. I think the fast roads with cars at 10 o'clock at night in the dark, they're not expecting a cow to walk out in the middle of the night. There would have been a massive pile-up. Then there'd been, like, who knows how many people dead. And then the police would have been criticised for not neutralising the threat.
The thing is, it was because he did... why... You could see the first time, the calf could barely stand up. I just don't get why I had to then go and do it a second time.
Well, I suppose at that point it's a bit like if you run over like a deer on the side of the road, you know, and if the police they're going to kill the animal to put it out of its misery. That's all I can presume. And the guy's not trained. This is Feltham. It isn't Texas. He's not going to come out with a lasso. He doesn't know what to do.
Where did this happen, Feltham?
Feltham. I'm sure the inbox is now going to be full of people saying, "Bev, you're outrageous. You lack compassion."
No, there will be people who agree with you. But if it had been done once, that was enough. But I don't think it needed to do it the second time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Don't miss our big interview with the Liberal Democrats leader, Sir Ed Davey. He'll speak to our political editor, Chris Hope, in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special, and that's from 7 p.m. this evening here on GB News. Now it's looking bleak for the French President Emmanuel Macron ahead of the election in his country this weekend. Senior figures in his party are apparently shunning Macron, who decided the French would go to the polls after the European Union election earlier this month didn't go quite according to plan. Well, let's cross live now to Paris and speak to the journalist Peter Allen. Peter, welcome to the show. So as we've been saying, Rishi Sunak called a snap election. He might live to regret it. It seems President Macron might do the same thing, a disastrous set of circumstances. Apparently Macron pacing around the Versailles Palace, an isolated figure, his own Prime Minister telling him he's hated out there on the campaign trail. Tell us more.
It's absolutely chaos over here at the moment, Martin. You wouldn't believe it. The country is meant to be gearing up for the Olympics. They start at the end of next month. First time in 100 years that they've been held in Paris. This was one of the great focal points of the Emmanuel Macron presidency. Instead, he's preparing for what looks as though it's going to be an absolutely disastrous election, not just for him, but for stability in the country. If I told you that today the Interior Minister, that's the equivalent of the Home Secretary over here, Gerald Darmanin, he says he's going whatever happens, he's quitting whatever happens at the start of these elections. What's this Interior Minister responsible for? All the security surrounding the Olympics. Crucially, there have also been claims by all sides of the political spectrum that there's going to be all-out war come the weekend, and certainly the weekend after, on the second round of voting. Marine Le Pen is saying the leftists are all going to be out rioting. The president himself, Emmanuel Macron, is saying that there could be civil war if extremists are elected. By extremists, he isn't just referring to Marine Le Pen's National Rally. He's also referring to the Popular Front, which is made up of very hard leftist parties, as well as some moderate ones, I have to say, as well. These are the kind of people who are being voted for by the French at the moment. We saw that in the European Parliament election just over 2 weeks ago now. About 35% of the country are said to be preparing to vote for the National Rally on Sunday. We shall see who they'll vote for a week later as well. And the new Popular Front, which is the leftist front, which is trying to stop the National Rally getting into power, the vote for them is approaching 30% as well. So it could really go either way. But what we do know is it's not going Emmanuel Macron's way, and it's certainly not going the way of a stable France, Martin.
It's an astonishing set of figures. Will this gamble spectacularly backfire? Briefly, if we could, Peter Aaron, Rishi Sunak may well live to regret calling that snap election. What about President Macron?
I think he will. Nobody really quite understood his motives to begin with. He wanted a clean start. He thought that people were going to back him after the shock of losing so much during the European elections. You could argue he'll still be in power. He's not up for election. He'll still be a president. Almost certainly going to be a lame duck president, though. And if there is rioting on the streets of Paris, I know we're quite used to that nowadays, but if there's very severe rioting and we're looking at an extremist government of either side, who will not be working with the president. They'll be trying to do their own things, and he'll be some kind of figure trying to calm everybody down. It's going to be chaos. And I think whatever happens at the moment, it does look as though he's going to regret it, Martin.
OK, Peter Aaron, an astonishing situation over the channel there in France. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be sure to get back to you in the next couple of weeks. Sounds like bedlam over there. Now, here is the full list of candidates standing in the constituency of Islington North at next week's general election. Jeremy Corbyn is the Independent, Paul Josling, also Independent, Vikas Agarwal, who's the Liberal Democrat, Karen Harris, who's Conservative, Prafal Nogand, who's Labour, and Sheridan Cates, Green, and also we have Martin Nelson, Reform UK. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll discuss reports that Prince William has taken on the disciplinary duties that Prince Philip once enforced on the family. Does the future king rule the royal family with an iron rod? That's coming next. But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour: the driver of a car that crashed into a school, killing two 8-year-old girls, will face no criminal charges. Nouria Sajjad and Selena Lau died after the crash at their school in Wimbledon in July last year. It was found the driver had suffered an epileptic seizure behind the wheel. She's expressed her deepest sorrow and says she has no recollection of what took place. But the parents of the girls killed said they remain unconvinced that the investigation into the circumstances of the crash had been conducted thoroughly, and they say both girls deserved better. Also today, Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end yesterday. A warning the following does contain flashing imagery. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says that he needs time now to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. A couple who are accused of the manslaughter of their baby daughter will face a retrial. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment near Brighton in March last year. And a man has been arrested in connection with a honey trap plot in Westminster. It's after an investigation related to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. And Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says his wife, the Princess Royal, is recovering slowly. Princess Anne is understood to have been injured by a horse whilst out walking on her estate on Sunday evening, but she suffered some memory loss and the exact circumstances of how she was hurt aren't yet known. However, she is expected to make a full recovery. Those are the headlines. For the latest, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's look at today's market numbers. In the pound, buying you $1.2624 and 1.1817 euros. The price of gold is £1,823 and 8 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is closed for the day today at 8,225 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, joining me now is the queen of primetime political debate, the one and only Michelle Julian. Michelle, what's on your menu?
Hello, Martin. I've got a cracking show for you, if I say so myself. I want to talk everything, really. Immigration, Gamblegate. I want to ask whether or not the high net worth should be subject to an additional tax. Of course, the ridiculousness about Kemi Badenoch, if you ask me, almost been having her death wished upon her before it was rolled back and basically told that she should shut up. I've got a great panel. I've got the man that's the biggest donor to Reform UK, Zia Youssef, and Aaron Bastani, Novara Media. So don't miss it.
Superb stuff. Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. Thank you very much. Now, if you want to get in touch with me, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west. As we go through the next 24 hours, as this unseasonably deep low approaches, that's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here, and that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius, so perhaps for some of us another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place. And you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across Northern England, the skies starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. North East Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for Eastern Scotland, but for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for Eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel. Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. On the Warwickshire-Staffordshire border, the M42 remains closed southbound junction 10 to 9 between Tamworth and Coleshill. After a lorry caught fire, the outside lane is also closed directly opposite with assistance going on. And the M6 is 2 lanes out northbound at the Corley services north of Coventry at the scene of a crash causing Quaysbanks junction 2 and along the Coventry bypass as you divert on the A46. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, 1 lane's closed southbound 13 to 12 heading south of Bedford where a car's broken down. South East London, the Rotherhithe Tunnel remains closed for emergency repairs, causing long queues in the area through Limehouse as a result. On London Underground, District Line trains are suspended. Turnham Green to Richmond because of problems with signals at Richmond. Severe delays on the stretch between Earls Court and Wimbledon, and severe delays on the Elizabeth Line at Abbey Wood to Reading and the Heathrow terminals. So that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now on to a matter which occupies the minds of many royal watchers. How deep is the rift between Prince William and Prince Harry? Well, it's been reported that Prince William is refusing to speak to Prince Harry and has even taken on the role of disciplinarian, which was once, of course, the job of Prince Philip. But has that job gone now to William? And does he indeed rule with a rod of iron? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former BBC royal correspondent Michael Cole. Himself has a lot of iron. Do you think this is a fair approximation of the character? After all, Michael Cole, surely the palace could do with a firm leader at the moment. Is Wills the man?
I think he is, Martin, and good afternoon to you. William, 42 last Friday. He's grown into the role of heir apparent. He looks good, he sounds good. And his role recently, in fact, at this moment, with the Japanese visit from the Emperor and Empress, has shown his importance to the royal family, never more so than now. He does the job well, and he is well set up to take over from the Duke of Edinburgh. Now, when the late Queen was alive, she was the chairman of the board, but the chief executive was definitely Prince Philip. She was the head of state, but he was the head of the family. He chaired the Way Ahead Committee. He liaised with the security services. And he laid down the law for a long, long time. Of course, Duchess of York, Sarah Fergie, was banished. And he also used to go through the invitation lists for any royal event, striking off people he didn't want there. So he was very much in charge. And I think the situation with William is that when he makes up his mind is made up. And he's doing extraordinarily well. And he's doing it without the daily support in public of his wife, of course. And we all wish Kate, the Princess of Wales, well and a speedy continued recovery. And I think the King will be welcoming his older son taking this more prominent role because, quite frankly, he can't do everything. He has to cry off some of his engagements. He's doing extraordinarily well. But it's a very, very good comfort to him to know that his eldest son is stepping up. And Martin, there was always a bit of doubt. After the death of his mother, I know that Prince William had to think again. And then we see him with the Emperor and Empress of Japan. William thought again, do I want to do this job? Because there's nothing in our uncodified, unwritten constitution that says anybody has to be heir to the throne. And he thought about it. He was only 15 at the time. And he decided he did, and he's done his duty, in great contrast to the man you mentioned at the top of your introduction, Prince Harry. Now, I don't think there's any chance at all of there being a reconciliation with the brothers now or in the foreseeable future. It goes back to Oprah Winfrey interview, then the book Spare, and all the things that were said in the Netflix six-part series. Too much bad blood. And William is not going to forgive that, principally because he, of course, and his wife attacked personally his wife, Kate. And even when the announcement of her cancer was made, their mealy-mouthed response to it didn't show any great concern to her.
Okay.
Because William looks at them and he would say what most people would say. All of this is completely unnecessary. It is unnecessary. Prince Harry has had a wonderful, privileged life. He owes everything to being a member of the royal family. He's good looking. He's married to a beautiful wife. He's got 2 healthy, beautiful children. He's got more money than we could shake a stick at. People who are struggling, people who are battling, would wonder why he's so upset.
Now, Michael Cole, I'm afraid I have to wield my own rod of iron. Call time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Now, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer will take part in a prime ministerial debate live on TV this evening. I'm about to talk to a member of Sir Keir's shadow cabinet. Ahead of that, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Wiltshire police have arrested 2 people after they sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge.
Well, Just Stop Oil have shared a video saying it's to get the incoming government to sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels by 2030. Of course, Stonehenge famously associated with oil, gas. I think the 5,000-year-old Neolithic Britons were prolific users of the internal combustion engine, and they drilled for lots of oil, so it makes perfect sense, of course.
Yes, we're going to be joined by Jill Taylor, a spokesperson from Just Stop Oil. Jill, thank you very much indeed. What on earth is this all about? This is just criminal activity under the guise of some kind of activism.
No, that's not. That paint will be washed off really easily. So it's not long-lasting damage at all. Unlike the damage that is being done now by the fossil fuel industry and just keeping burning fossil fuels, putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. You're right, the Neolithic people were not prolific users of fossil fuels. They did not cause the kind of damage that we're causing now. That's all been within since the Industrial Revolution in the 150 years.
So because
this is when the damage has been done.
So because this stuff can be washed off, ergo there's no issue here. Well, Stonehenge aren't particularly happy about this. They've come out on their social media page and they say Stonehenge is protected by the Ancient Monuments Act and it is a criminal offence to damage the stones. There are also multiple rare lichen species growing on the stones that are also protected. So this isn't good for nature, is it?
I think you're getting things so out of perspective here. What isn't good for nature is the damage we're doing now, and what's not good for nature globally is not good for you, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people watching this programme.
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, go to gbnews.com/election party.
Don't miss our big interview with the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. He'll speak to our political editor, Chris Hope, in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special. And that's from 7 p.m. this evening here on GB News. Now let's go back to our top story this hour, and the latest major opinion polls predict that the Tories are heading for electoral wipeout next week. An MRP poll conducted by Electoral Calculus suggests that Labour will win with a majority of 250. And let's cross now to my home city, Nottingham, and speak to our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, another eye-popping set of numbers. Let's quickly run through a few of those top numbers. 450 seats predicted for the Labour Party, the Conservatives on 60, Libs on 71, and the Reform Party on 18, Chris.
That's right. Hi, Martin. Yeah, you're joining me here in the spin room where all the journalists gather. It's very warm, by the way, in the spin room as we wait for this head-to-head debate, the last one before the election day, or the voting day, Thursday next week, between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. Rather than a back-to-back audience-led debate, as we've had in other events so far in this campaign, they'll be going literally toe-to-toe. It could be quite dramatic. I'll be here with all the reaction, the build-up in the spin room, and after the reaction. Do tune in to GB News for that. But this polling is alarming and shocking. It's of a piece that we've seen before. It compares less favourably to an MRP poll by Electoral Calculus and Find Out Now that we revealed at the beginning of this campaign. The Tories have now gone backwards in this campaign, down to as few as 60 MPs, according to this poll. Labour on 450. The Liberal Democrats become the official opposition on 71. Reform UK get 18 MPs. Now, that's from a position of 0. This is historic. It's the Tories' worst result, if this happens, since 1900. Labour's best since the 1930s. Reform, well, it's best ever because they never had any MPs. The previous MP who was linked to Nigel Farage, the leader, of course, was Douglas Carswell in Clacton in 2015. SNP on 24, Plaid on 4, and there's a single independent candidate, Jeremy Corbyn. He hangs on despite the fact he's been kicked out of the Labour Party. So quite dramatic stuff here from the polls. An MRP poll, 19,000 people polled between the 14th of June and the 24th of June. The Tories would say, were they here, that the only poll that matters, of course, is the Election Day poll, which is next week, Thursday, and we hear the results on Friday. Labour, for its part, we'll hear from Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, shortly. But I was talking to a senior Shadow Cabinet Minister on the way here, and I muttered about this polling, and they said we are very worried here because could all these polls be wrong? Everyone's forecasting a landslide, a supermajority for the Labour Party, and the Tories are talking it up almost to scare voters into voting Conservative. So the question is whether the polls will be right and wrong next Friday.
Now, I know you're just waiting there for Bridget Phillipson to come in.
Bridget Phillipson. Yeah, Bridget Phillipson is with me now, the Shadow Education Secretary. Bridget Phillipson, thank you for joining me on GB News. There's a poll just dropped from Electoral Calculus and Find Out Now, forecasting a huge majority for your party, 250. Tories down to third place, which is 60 MPs. You're on 450. People you would have imagined never getting back into Parliament when these seats were selected look like they could be on their way to Parliament next Friday. What's your reaction?
Well, we've had a lot of polls during this campaign, and my advice to voters would be to not pay too much attention to those polls. There is big variation between them in terms of outcome. You know, one poll, for example, had 175 seats that were too close to call. So my message is that the people want change. The only way to make that happen is to go out and vote for it. Nothing is decided, nothing is a done deal, and there are still a lot of people who I know are considering how they're going to vote and haven't made their minds up.
But these polls are now driving the narrative of the campaign, aren't they? I mean, the Tory party is talking about a supermajority for your party and almost trying to scare people into not voting Labour because they're worried about their taxation and the rest of it.
I do think the Tories are adopting a voter suppression strategy. They want people to think that this is settled, that, you know, the outcome is already determined. It really is not. I mean, we've still got millions and millions of people who will go to the polls on the 4th of July. That is how we will get that. You know, the only poll that matters is what we get as a result of that general election. We're focused on working hard and trying to win the trust of the British people, fighting for every vote. That's why I've been in lots of constituencies right across the country. And I know from those doorsteps that there are lots of people who haven't made their minds up and they're still weighing up their options. So my message to those people is, Don't wake up on the 5th of July and discover you've got another 5 more years of the Conservatives. If you want change, vote for it.
There's an individual arrested today over this honey trap scandal in Westminster. We understand it could be linked to the Labour Party. What do you know about this person?
I know no more than has been publicly disclosed, and you'll appreciate this is now an ongoing police investigation, so there's not a great deal more that I could say about it, but I'm confident, of course, the police will follow any lines of inquiry and will do a diligent job.
Looking into this big debate, we're here in Nottingham. It's the second head-to-head of the campaign between the two main leaders, Rishi Sunak and your leader, Sir Keir Starmer. What does Sir Keir need to do to land his points with voters?
I think Keir will be pitching to those voters who haven't made their minds up. As I was just saying, there is still a lot of uncertainty, and setting out the clear difference that will exist between a Labour government and a Conservative government, how we get our economy moving once more, how we rebuild our NHS, how we secure our borders, all of which are in line with the priorities of the British people. And our manifesto's got a plan behind it, how we will deliver on it, how we'll pay for it. I think he will also seek to draw a contrast with Rishi Sunak's manifesto, which I regard as a wish list full of unfunded commitments that risks crashing the economy just like they did last time under Liz Truss.
Your manifesto is less open about some areas of taxation, maybe council tax, maybe inheritance tax, capital gains tax. Will you come down on those who are wealthy if you win power next Friday?
So everything within our manifesto has got a plan behind it, so we don't require any additional changes in taxation in order to deliver on the commitments we've made. And we have given that ironclad commitment in the manifesto that there'll be no increases in VAT, income tax or national insurance under a Labour government.
The manifesto is what everyone's worrying about at the moment, isn't it?
But what's in the manifesto doesn't require for any additional measures other than those which we've set out. For example, ending tax breaks in private schools, putting that money into state education. We have set out some discrete changes, but beyond that, our focus is on growing our economy. That's how, in the long run, we'll be able to ease the burden that working families are facing and also invest in our public services.
The Tories say that dogs bark, cats meow, and Labour put up taxes. They're right, aren't they?
I mean, taxes are at their highest level for 70 years under the Conservatives. Working people have been absolutely hammered. And I think, you know, your viewers will know that they're paying more every month on their mortgage or on their rent because of interest rate increases that came out of Liz Truss and that disastrous mini-budget. So I'm afraid the Conservatives have played fast and loose for far too long with the public finances. Rachel Reeves will bring a sense of discipline back to our economy, will get our economy back on a more stable footing. And that's also how I think we can unlock some of that business investment that we need to see, attracting more business investment to the UK, but also supporting businesses here to grow. And I think there is just so much more that we could do, and I've seen some amazing businesses during the campaign that would relish that opportunity.
Your opposite number, Julian Keegan, says that you'll allow teachers to teach gender ideology in schools. What do you take on that? Do you accept that? So, I mean, you're just changing the rules, aren't you, and how children can, if they want to change gender at school?
No, I do think it's important we get clear guidance for school leaders and for teachers. I've heard their concerns. They want to be clear about how they approach this issue. But I do say this is sensitive, this is difficult, and we're talking about children's well-being, and I think we need to approach it with a sense of seriousness and care. We do need to make sure schools have got what they need, but there have been the government were consulted on this, published, asked for responses. That was left at the point at which the election was called. But there have been other developments since. For example, Hilary Cass published her review into wider health provision after the government's consultation. I think we also need to look at that in tandem with any guidance to make sure that schools are absolutely clear and confident about how they support children and young people.
Well, Bridget Phillips, thank you for joining us today on GB News. That's Bridget Phillips, now the Shadow Education Secretary, setting out how she thinks Sir Keir Starmer can win support tonight from voters.
Some live there from Nottingham ahead of the final leaders' debate tonight. Now, just to repeat some astonishing data in Labour, 450 seats, Liberal Democrats 71, Conservatives 60, SNP 24, and the Reform Party breaking through on 18 seats. That's the latest poll by Electoral Calculus. Now, that's it from me. Jubes & Co. is up next, 6 till 7. And don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Stephen and Eddie, of course, the show of the year, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. Then I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. What a day it's been. An astonishing set of polls. Jubes & Co. is up next. Thanks for all your comments. And I think I was right all along. It is time to get rid of Gareth Southgate. And I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, first, it's time for your next show. Jubes & Co.
latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner in South Yorkshire, southeast of Sheffield city centre. The Mansfield Road remains closed through intake. Those investigation works are still taking place at the scene of a serious accident this afternoon. In North Wales, the